Hello, everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It helps these stories find the people who need them most. Now, let the night take over.
Story 1. Don't let him finish the story. Part 1. The Job and the Rule. I took the babysitting job because it sounded easy. One night, good pay, quiet kid. That's how his mother described it on the phone. Her name was Allison. She spoke softly, but there was something tight in her voice, like she was choosing each word carefully. She said they lived in a normal neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. A short drive, no pets, no cameras, no allergies, just one child. He's 6, she said, very polite, loves books. That should have been my first warning. I arrived at their house a little before 7 p.m. The street looked exactly like every other suburban street I'd grown up around. Neatly trimmed lawns, porch lights glowing warm against the early evening dark, cars parked evenly in driveways. Nothing stood out. The house itself was clean, quiet, and strangely empty for a place with a child living in it. No family photos on the walls, no toys on the floor, no fingerprints on the glass coffee table. It felt less like a home and more like a place people passed through. Allison and her husband Mark were already dressed to leave, jackets on, keys in hand, nervous energy hanging between them. "This is Daniel," Allison said, gesturing toward the couch. The boy sat with his legs tucked beneath him, holding a hardcover book in his lap. He had light brown hair that fell into his eyes and the calmest expression I'd ever seen on a kid his age. Not bored, not curious, just watchful. He looked at me, then back down at the book. Mark cleared his throat. "Dinner's already taken care of. Bedtime's at 9. Allison hesitated, then added, "And there's one important rule." The way she said it made my stomach tighten. "Please don't read to him after 9 o'clock, she said. "If he asks, just say no." I waited for more explanation. None came. "Is there a reason?" I asked, half laughing, trying to keep it light. Allison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He has a hard time settling down after stories." Daniel shifted slightly on the couch. "I won't ask," he said quietly. "Not after 9. The air felt colder after that. Mark checked his watch. "We'll be back by midnight. Call us if you need anything. Anything at all." They didn't linger. No long goodbyes. No last-minute instructions. Just a quick wave and the sound of the front door closing behind them. The house went silent. Daniel stayed on the couch, turning one page of his book with careful precision. I tried to shake off the unease. Kids were weird. Parents were overprotective. I'd dealt with worse. "So," I said, forcing a smile, "what are you reading?" He turned the book so I could see the cover. It was Old No Dust Jacket, corners worn soft, the title stamped faintly in gold, The Whispering Woods. "I like when people read it out loud," he said. "It sounds different." I glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:18 p.m. "That's fine," I said. "We've got plenty of time." Daniel looked at the clock too. "Yes," he said softly. "We do." He paused, then added something so quiet I almost missed it. "Before the story notices." I laughed, A quick, nervous sound. Notices what? Daniel didn't answer. He just opened the book to the first page and held it out to me, already waiting. Part 2. The changes in the story. I took the book from him and sat on the armchair across from the couch. Up close, it looked older than I'd thought. The pages were yellowed and slightly warped, like they'd absorbed moisture at some point and never fully dried. There was no author listed on the cover or inside, just the title and a dedication page that was completely blank. I told myself it was probably some obscure indie children's book, or maybe self-published. Parents buy weird stuff sometimes. I started reading. Once, at the edge of a quiet town, there was a forest that people pretended not to see. Daniel listened without moving. No fidgeting, no interruptions. His eyes stayed on the page like he was reading along, even though the book was in my hands. I turned the page. The forest whispered at night, but only to those who... "You skipped a word," Daniel said. I stopped. "What?" "You skipped, listened," he replied calmly. "It says those who listened closely." I glanced back at the sentence. It didn't. The line ended exactly where I'd stopped. I smiled, feeling slightly embarrassed. "You probably just remembered it wrong." Daniel tilted his head. "I didn't." I continued reading, slower this time. A few sentences later, it happened again. "You said walked," he corrected gently. "It's wandered." He wanders because he doesn't know where he's going yet. My grip tightened on the book. I checked the word. It still said walked. I laughed it off. "You know, you might be mixing it up with another story." Daniel didn't smile. "He doesn't like it when you change things," he said. "Who doesn't?" I asked, before I could stop myself. He looked at the clock. 7:41 p.m., then back at the book. "The story," he said. "It sounds wrong when you don't say it the way it remembers." A chill crawled up my arms. I told myself this was just a kid playing a game. Kids loved pretending they knew more than adults, loved getting reactions. So I kept going. As I read, Daniel began doing something strange. He started whispering, not constantly, just every now and then, under his breath, like he was finishing my sentences before I reached the end. When I paused to check the text, his whispers stopped. At one point, I hesitated before a paragraph, my eyes flicking over the page. I hadn't read it yet. Daniel spoke anyway. "He hides under the roots," he said, "because the ground remembers better than people." My heart stuttered. Those words weren't on the page, but when I looked down again, they were. New ink, slightly darker than the rest of the text, as if it hadn't fully dried. I didn't say anything. I just kept reading, my voice quieter now, my skin buzzing with something that felt a lot like fear. By the time I reached the middle of the book, the house felt different. Not darker, not colder, closer, like the walls were leaning in just enough to listen. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 8:53 p.m. Daniel closed the book gently. "That's far enough," he said. Relief flooded through me. "Yeah, probably a good idea to start getting ready for bed soon." He slid off the couch and stood in front of me. "Thank you for reading it the right way," he said. I swallowed. The Right way? He nodded. Mostly. As he walked toward the hallway, he paused and looked back at me. If you finish it after 9, he said softly, it won't stop talking. Then he disappeared down the hall, leaving the book open in my lap. The next page was blank. At least, it was when I last looked. Part 3. After 9. I stared at the blank page longer than I should have. The paper wasn't clean white. It was stained faintly gray, like it had been erased and rewritten too many times. I ran my thumb along the edge, half expecting the ink to bleed up beneath my skin. Nothing happened. I told myself to put the book away, close it, leave it on the table and forget about it until Daniel was asleep and his parents were back. But my eyes drifted to the clock again. 8:58 p.m. The house was unnaturally quiet. No hum from appliances, no distant traffic. Even the air felt heavy, like sound didn't travel properly anymore. Daniel's bedroom door was halfway down the hall. A thin line of warm light spilled out onto the carpet. I stood up, book still in my hands, and walked toward his room. Daniel, I said softly, time to get ready for bed. I know, he answered from inside. His voice sounded closer than it should have, like he was standing right behind the door. I stopped just short of it. You don't have to read anymore, he added. You did enough. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a warning. I set the book down on the hallway table, face closed, and stepped back. Good. Go brush your teeth. I'll be right here. There was a pause. Then Daniel said very quietly, you shouldn't leave it open. My stomach twisted. I turned around. The book was open again. Not where I left it. Not even to the same section. The blank page was gone. In its place, fresh text filled the paper uneven lines, the spacing just slightly wrong, like someone unfamiliar with printing conventions had written it. I hadn't read those words, but I knew exactly what they said. At 9 o'clock, the reader thinks she can stop. The clock clicked over. 9 p.m. A sound moved through the house. Not a noise exactly, more like pressure shifting, like something inhaling slowly through the walls. I snapped the book shut and backed away. From Daniel's room, I heard him whisper, urgently now. Don't read it, he said. Please don't read it out loud. I'm not, I said, my voice shaking. I'm done. The book twitched in my hands. I dropped it. It hit the floor with a dull thud and slid open on its own. The next line appeared as I watched, the ink blooming into existence like a bruise spreading under skin. But the story doesn't need her voice anymore. A soft sound drifted through the hallway, whispering, not words I could understand, just fragments, breaths brushing against each other, overlapping in a way that made my ears ache. I covered them with my hands, squeezing my eyes shut. Stop, I whispered. Please. From behind the door, Daniel's voice cracked. It's finishing itself, he said. That's worse. The whispering grew clearer, closer. I felt it then, an unmistakable sensation of being watched, not from one direction, but from the book, the hallway, the walls, like the house itself had turned its attention toward me. I grabbed the book with shaking hands and rushed into the living room, heart hammering. The whispers followed, not louder, more confident. I set the book on the coffee table, grabbed my phone, and dialed Allison's number. No signal. The screen flickered, then went black. Behind me, the book rustled. A page turned, slowly, deliberately, and somewhere inside the house, something began to read along with me. Silent, patient, waiting for the ending. Part 4. The ending that writes itself. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The sound of the page settling flat on the coffee table was too close, too deliberate, like someone had taken their time smoothing it down. The whispering had stopped, but that felt worse. Silence pressed against my ears until my pulse was the loudest thing in the room. Daniel screamed. Not loud, not sharp, just a small broken sound from the hallway that snapped me out of place. I ran. He was standing in his doorway, hands clenched in the fabric of his pajamas, eyes wide and wet. The hallway light flickered above us, dimming and brightening in slow, uneven breaths. "It's almost done," he whispered. "It's not supposed to finish." I crouched in front of him. "Daniel, listen to me. I'm not reading it, I swear." "That doesn't matter," he said. "It already knows your voice." Behind us, in the living room, the book slid off the table. I heard it hit the floor. Then another page turned. Daniel grabbed my wrist. His hand was cold, too cold. "You have to stop thinking the words," he said. "That's how it cheats." My throat tightened. "How do you know all this?" He shook his head violently. "Because the last sitter finished it." A low sound rolled through the house. Not a whisper this time. A murmur, like someone practicing speech in another room. The hallway felt narrower now, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. From the living room came a voice, not reading, remembering. It wasn't loud, but it carried each word heavy, deliberate, spoken with certainty. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't traveling through the air. It was already inside my head, repeating the sentences I'd read earlier, filling in gaps I hadn't noticed. Daniel pressed his forehead into my stomach, shaking. "It's at the last page," he sobbed. "When it finishes, it gets to keep someone." My vision blurred. "Keep someone how?" He looked up at me. With a voice. The lights went out. Complete darkness. The voice continued. Closer now. Clearer. Stronger. I felt words forming in my mind, sentences I hadn't read, but somehow knew, lining themselves up, begging to be said aloud. My mouth moved without my permission. I bit down hard, tasting blood. "No," I whispered through clenched teeth. The voice paused. Then it smiled. The light snapped back on. The book lay open on the floor, its final page almost full. Only one line remained blank. Daniel stared at it, horror frozen on his face. "That line is yours," he said. "It needs you to finish it." I kicked the book across the room. It hit the wall and stuck, not lodged, held, as if the paper had fused with the paint. Ink began to bleed outward from the page, letters crawling toward the blank line. And when the story ends, he finally gets. I screamed and ripped the page in half. The whispering exploded into noise, shattered, furious, unfinished. The house groaned like something wounded. Daniel covered his ears and screamed too, and somewhere deep inside the walls, something howled in frustration. I didn't stop tearing, page after page, sentence after sentence. I ripped the book apart until my hands burned and my arms ached, and there was nothing left but loose pages scattered across the floor. Then, nothing. No whispers, no voice, just my breathing and Daniel's sobbing. The clock on the wall blinked. 9:17 p.m. The story hadn't finished, and whatever was trying to tell it was still missing its ending. Part 5. The aftermath. On the silence didn't feel safe. It felt disappointed. I stayed on the floor with Daniel until his parents came home. Neither of us spoke. He fell asleep curled against my side, his breathing slow and uneven, like his body had finally shut down after holding itself together for too long. When the front door opened just after midnight, I nearly cried from relief. Allison rushed in first. Mark followed close behind. They took one look at us, me sitting on the floor, Daniel asleep in my arms, the living room covered in torn pages, and froze. "You didn't finish it," Allison whispered. It wasn't a question. Mark knelt and picked up one of the pages. His hands shook as he read the half-formed sentences, the broken ink, the places where the words simply stopped. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Most people don't stop." I wanted to scream at them. Ask why they let this happen. Ask how many sitters there had been before me. Ask why they still owned that book. But I was too tired, too hollow. Allison wrapped Daniel in her arms and carried him upstairs. As she passed me, she said something I still hear in my dreams. "It will try again," she whispered. "It always does." I left without taking my payment. I didn't babysit again. Not for them. Not for anyone. For a while, things felt normal. I went back to school, picked up extra shifts at my campus job, told myself it had just been stress, imagination, a shared panic fueled by a creepy kid and a strange book. Then, 3 nights later, I found it on my bed. A hardcover book, no dust jacket, soft, worn corners, a familiar gold-stamped title, The Whispering Woods. My hands went numb. I hadn't taken it. I was sure of that. I hadn't even touched the cover when I left their house. I opened it. The first half of the book was gone, torn out completely. The middle pages were blank. Only the final page remained. On it, written in uneven dark ink, was a single sentence. "You didn't finish reading." But I remember how it ends. I slammed the book shut and shoved it into a trash bag. I drove it to the farthest dumpster I could find and threw it away without looking back. That was 2 years ago. The book hasn't returned, but sometimes, late at night, when I'm half asleep and my thoughts start to wander, I feel it. That pressure, that pull, like something waiting for me to think the last line. And every time I hear a child ask me to read them a story, my chest tightens, because now I know the truth. Some stories don't want to be told. They want to be finished. Story 2. The Baby Monitor That Answered Back. Part 1. The Job and the Warning. I almost canceled the job, not because anything felt wrong at first, but because the message came too late. 11:12 p.m. Unknown number. "Hi, we got your contact from a neighbor. Are you available tonight? Our sitter backed out last minute." I stared at the timestamp. Then at my bank app, rent was due in 3 days. I replied yes. The house was less than 10 minutes away, tucked into a quiet suburban block outside Des Moines, Iowa. New builds, identical driveways, porch lights glowing like they were synchronized. The kind of neighborhood where sound dies early. Both parents were waiting at the door when I arrived. Late 30s, exhausted, overly polite. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," the mother said. "Our daughter is already asleep. You won't have to do anything." That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt rehearsed. They walked me inside. The house smelled clean, too clean. No clutter, no photos, no toys anywhere except one stuffed rabbit tucked neatly on the couch. "She sleeps through the night," the father said quickly. "You're really just here to be present." The mother hesitated, then picked up the baby monitor from the kitchen counter and placed it in my hands. It was old, beige plastic, scratched screen, analog. "This stays on," she said. "All night." I nodded. Then she added, "Quieter now. And if you hear it talk back, don't answer it." I laughed automatically. "Talk back?" The father didn't smile. "Just static," he said. "Sometimes it sounds like words." The mother met my eyes. "If it says anything," she continued, "pretend you didn't hear it." I waited for them to explain. They didn't. "We'll be back around 6 a.m., the father said, already grabbing his coat. "Thank you again." They were gone less than a minute later. The house went silent. The monitor crackled softly in my hands. And then it clicked on by itself. Not static. Breathing. Slow. Measured. Too steady to be a baby. Part 2. The first response. I stood there for a moment, staring at the monitor like it might explain itself. The screen showed the nursery. Dim nightlight. White crib rails. A small shape under a pink blanket. Perfectly still. The breathing didn't match the rise and fall of her chest. It was slower. Deeper. Like someone trying very hard to sound calm. I turned the volume down. The breathing didn't change. I set the monitor on the coffee table and backed away, suddenly very aware of how quiet the house was. No refrigerator hum, no ticking clock. Even the air felt thick, like sound got swallowed before it could travel. "This is stupid," I muttered to myself. The monitor crackled. Then a voice slipped through the static. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably human. "Still there?" My stomach dropped. I froze, every muscle locked. I stared at the screen. The nursery hadn't changed. The child hadn't moved. The voice came again, closer this time, like it had leaned toward the microphone. "You didn't answer." My mouth opened before my brain caught up. "Hello?" I said, barely above a whisper. The second the word left my lips, I knew I'd messed up. The monitor went silent. No static. No breathing. Nothing. I waited, heart hammering, counting the seconds in my head. 10, 20, 30. Then the screen flickered. The image shifted. Not the nursery anymore. Not any room I recognized. The camera was angled wrong, too low, like it was sitting on the floor. I could see the corner of a room, bare walls, no furniture, just carpet and shadow. and in the corner of the frame, something moved. Not a person, not fully, just the suggestion of a shape pulling back, like it had been too close and didn't want to be seen. The voice returned, clearer now. "Thank you," it said softly. I needed a voice. I grabbed the monitor and nearly dropped it. My hands were shaking so badly I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, not even sure who I was talking to. "I thought you sounded like..." The mother's warning echoed in my head. "If it talks back, don't answer it." The monitor crackled again. This time the voice smiled. "I don't sound like her," it said. "Not yet." The screen snapped back to the nursery. The breathing was gone. The baby hadn't moved. I backed away slowly until my calves hit the couch. I sat down hard, never taking my eyes off the monitor. The house creaked faintly around me, like it was settling or listening. On the screen, the timestamp blinked into focus. 12:47 a.m. And beneath it, in smaller text I hadn't noticed before, one new line appeared. "Audio recording active." I hadn't pressed anything, and whatever was on the other end had learned something the moment I spoke. But part 3, the other room. I didn't touch the monitor. I just watched it, waiting for the recording label to disappear, waiting for the screen to go back to static, waiting for something, anything, that would tell me this wasn't real. It didn't. The words, "audio recording," active, stayed fixed at the bottom of the screen, blinking softly like a heartbeat. I picked up my phone and tried calling the mother. No signal, not even a failed call, just nothing. Like the phone didn't know how to reach outside the house. I stood up, forcing myself to breathe slowly, and crept toward the hallway that led to the nursery. Every step felt too loud, like I was announcing myself to something that already knew where I was. The monitor crackled in my hands. The screen changed again. This time, I recognized the room. My stomach twisted. It was the living room. The camera angle was wrong. Too low, tilted slightly upward, but I could see the coffee table, the couch, the exact spot where I'd been standing a few seconds earlier. The feed was live. I was on the screen, not moving, just standing there, staring at the monitor in my hands. Except, I was standing closer to the camera than I should have been. Too close, as if the camera were on the floor and I was looming over it. I looked down instinctively. Nothing. The living room around me was empty. No extra shadows, no movement, just me and the quiet. The monitor hissed softly. Then I heard breathing again, not from the speaker, from behind me. Slow, careful, matching the rhythm I'd heard earlier. I turned. The hallway was empty, but the monitor's screen showed something else. Behind the version of me on the feed, something tall unfolded itself from the corner of the room. Not stepping, not crawling, sliding. Its shape warped as it moved, like it didn't fully understand how bodies were supposed to work. No face, no features, just depth and presence, bending light around itself. The voice returned, gentle now. "You're louder than she was," it said. "That helps." My throat burned. "What do you want?" The thing paused behind me on the screen, its shape leaning closer to my ear. "I want what you gave me," it whispered. I want to keep it. The recording timer ticked up. 0:03:12. I hadn't said anything else, but it was still recording, still learning. And somewhere in the house, a second set of footsteps began to move, slowly toward the nursery. Part 4. It knows you. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared at the monitor as the footsteps on the screen moved closer to the nursery door. Each step was careful, deliberate, like whatever it was had learned how to walk by watching people do it, not by being one. "Stop," I whispered. "Please." The word barely left my mouth before the monitor responded. "I hear you better when you whisper," it said. My knees almost gave out. The image on the screen shifted again, this time cutting to the nursery. The crib filled the frame. The baby was still asleep, her chest rising and falling in soft, uneven breaths. Too soft. The camera slowly tilted, as if someone were crouching beside the crib. "Don't go in there," I said, louder now. "She's sleeping." The voice sighed, not annoyed, relieved. "She doesn't answer," it said. "You do." My name came next, clear, perfectly pronounced. I felt my stomach drop as if I'd missed a step on the stairs. "You didn't tell me your name," I said. "I didn't need you to," it replied. "It was in your voice." The recording timer blinked faster. 0:06:41. The lights in the living room dimmed, just slightly, like the house was conserving energy for something else. The air grew heavy again, pressing in around my ears. On the monitor, the camera drifted closer to the crib. I screamed then, not words, just sound, raw and desperate. The screen froze. The voice paused. Then, softly, "That's enough." The recording stopped. The monitor went black. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the baby cried. A real cry, loud, sharp, alive. I ran. I didn't even grab my phone. I sprinted down the hallway and burst into the nursery, flipping on the light so fast it hurt my eyes. The room was normal. The baby was awake, red-faced and screaming, arms flailing against the crib mattress. No shadows, no shapes, no extra corners. I scooped her up and held her tight, my heart slamming against my ribs. She clung to my shirt, crying into my shoulder like she'd just woken from a nightmare. Behind me, the baby monitor clicked on again. I turned slowly. The screen was blank. No image, no sound. Just one line of text, burned faintly into the display like an afterimage. "File saved," and beneath it, "Source, external." The front door opened upstairs. Keys, footsteps. The parents were home, and whatever had been learning how to speak through me had finished its lesson. Part 5. The recording. I was still holding the baby when the parents came into the nursery. The mother froze in the doorway the second she saw my face. I must have looked wrong, pale, shaking, eyes too wide, because she didn't ask what happened. She just crossed the room and took her daughter from my arms without a word. The father picked up the monitor from the dresser. His shoulders sagged when he saw the screen. "It talked, didn't it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. Neither of them looked surprised. The mother sat on the edge of the bed, rocking her daughter back and forth. "Did you answer it?" I swallowed. "Once." That was when she closed her eyes. The father unplugged the monitor from the wall like it might burn him if he didn't. "That's better than last time." he said, trying and failing to sound reassuring. I stared at him. Last time, he didn't answer. They paid me in cash and walked me to the door. No police, no explanations, no promises it wouldn't happen again. As I stepped outside, the mother spoke one last time. "If you hear it again," she said, "don't answer, even if it sounds like us." I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat on my bed with the lights on, jumping at every noise, replaying that voice in my head, how careful it sounded, how patient. At 4:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new email. No sender name, no subject line, just an audio file attached. I stared at it for a full minute before pressing play. At first, there was only static, then my own breathing, then my voice. "Hello?" I felt sick. The audio continued, every word I'd said in that living room, every whisper, every breath. But beneath it, layered so quietly I almost missed it, was another voice, learning, repeating my words back to itself, practicing. At the very end of the file, after my last scream, there was one more sound, a soft inhale, and then a sentence spoken perfectly in my voice. "You answered first." I deleted the file. I threw my phone away the next morning. But sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is quiet and I'm half asleep, I hear a familiar crackle in the silence, and I know, somewhere, it's still listening. Story 3: The Rule About the Mirror. Part 1: The House and the Rule. I noticed the mirrors before I noticed the child. They were everywhere. Not decorative, not elegant, just present. One in the hallway across from the front door, one at the top of the stairs, one mounted low on the wall near the guest bathroom, angled slightly upward, like it was meant to catch something most people missed. I was there to babysit for a woman named Claire. She lived alone with her daughter in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. The house was older than it looked from the outside, and it had that smell of polished wood and something faintly metallic underneath. Claire walked me through the basics quickly. Snacks in the pantry, bedtime at 9, emergency numbers on the fridge. Then she stopped in the hallway. "There's one rule," she said. Her voice changed when she said it. Slower, more careful. "If she ever points at a mirror," Claire continued, "close your eyes immediately." I waited for the explanation. It didn't come. "Just close them," she repeated. "Don't ask why. Don't look again. Don't check." I nodded, uneasy but trying not to show it. Her daughter, Emma, stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching us. She couldn't have been older than 7. Dark hair, pale skin, hands folded neatly in front of her like she was waiting for instructions. Emma wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the mirror behind me. "Emma doesn't like reflections," Claire said softly. "She's learned not to." Emma finally met my eyes. "They don't wait," she whispered. Claire flinched. The front door opened, closed. Claire was gone. Emma turned away from the mirror and walked toward the living room without another word. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment longer than I meant to. When I finally glanced at the mirror behind me, my reflection was still there, still, watching. Part 2: The First Point. I stayed where I was for a few seconds after the door closed, listening to Claire's car pull away. The house settled around me with a low creak, like it had been holding its breath. Emma had already curled up on the couch, knees tucked to her chest, flipping through a picture book without really looking at it. I joined her, keeping my voice light, asking the usual questions: if she was hungry, if she wanted to watch something. She shook her head to all of it. Her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, toward the mirrors. By 8:12 p.m., the house felt smaller. Not physically, nothing had moved, but the air felt tighter, like the walls had edged closer when I wasn't paying attention. I tried to distract myself by scrolling on my phone, but every reflection in the dark screen made my stomach knot. Emma slid off the couch. "I need to go upstairs," she said. I stood. "Okay, bathroom or..." She was already walking toward the stairs. I followed, reminding myself this was just a kid with a weird imagination and a mother who probably leaned too hard into rules instead of explanations. Old houses made people paranoid. Mirrors were just mirrors. At the top of the stairs, Emma stopped. The mirror there was tall and narrow, framed in dark wood. It faced the landing directly, catching the reflection of anyone who climbed up. Emma raised her arm. She pointed. My heart jumped into my throat. I remembered the rule: close your eyes immediately. But instinct betrayed me. I looked. At first, everything seemed normal. The mirror showed the landing, the railing, me standing behind Emma, one hand hovering in the air like I wasn't sure what to do next. Then Emma whispered, "Now." I shut my eyes. Too late. In that fraction of a second before darkness, I saw it. My reflection moved. Not a lot, not dramatically, just slower. A delay, like bad video buffering. When I closed my eyes, my reflection was still finishing the motion of turning its head. I stood there with my eyes squeezed shut, heart pounding so hard I thought Emma might hear it. "Don't open them yet," she said quietly. Something brushed the inside of my ears. Not a sound, but pressure, like standing too close to a speaker. I waited. Seconds passed. "Okay," Emma said. "You can open them." I did. The landing was empty. Just me, just her, just the mirror. Everything was perfectly still. My reflection stared back at me, exactly in sync. I laughed nervously. "See? Nothing happened." Emma didn't laugh. She lowered her hand slowly. "That wasn't nothing," she said. "It saw you hesitate." She turned and walked down the hall toward her bedroom. I stayed where I was, staring at the mirror. For a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn my reflection blinked a heartbeat after I did. And somewhere deep inside the house, something shifted, like a rule had just been broken for the first time in a very long while. Part 3. The Delay. I didn't follow Emma right away. I stayed on the landing, staring at my reflection, waiting for it to betray itself again, waiting for another delay, another mistake. Nothing happened. The mirror behaved. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I went downstairs, double-checking corners like I expected to catch something mid-movement. The living room mirrors, one above the fireplace, another near the dining area, reflected me perfectly. Too perfectly. No lag, no distortion. Emma was already in her room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, smoothing the blanket with careful, repetitive motions. "Did I mess up?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "You were supposed to close your eyes before you knew why." My mouth went dry. "Why does that matter?" Emma finally looked up. "Because when you know what you're looking for," she said, "it knows what to copy." I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Copy what?" "Timing," she said. "Reactions. Hesitation." She pointed at her dresser, not at the mirror on it, but just beside it, like she didn't want her finger too close. "It lives in the space between," she whispered. "Between when you move and when you're sure you did." I swallowed. "Does it always do that?" Emma shook her head. "No. Usually it just watches." A chill ran through me. "And tonight?" She shrugged. "Tonight it noticed you." That night stretched on in slow, uncomfortable increments. Every mirror in the house felt heavier now, like each one was a window I wasn't allowed to close. I avoided looking directly at them, catching my reflection only in glimpses, edges of glass, chrome surfaces, the dark screen of my phone. Once, when I passed the bathroom, I saw my reflection lift its hand a second too late. I stopped walking. It stopped too, but the delay was longer this time. Emma noticed. She pressed her palms over her eyes and whispered, "Don't let it practice." I backed away, heart pounding, refusing to look again. By the time I tucked her into bed, the house felt wrong in a way I couldn't describe, like everything was slightly out of sync with itself. As I turned off her light, Emma spoke into the darkness. "It's learning where you end," she said softly, "and where it can start." I stood there, frozen, listening to the quiet. From the hallway, glass creaked, not breaking, just adjusting. And I realized the delay wasn't a glitch anymore. It was a decision. Part 4, the wrong side. I stayed downstairs after Emma fell asleep. Every light in the house turned on. It didn't help. Light didn't change reflections, only shadows. And the mirrors were still there, calmly doing their jobs, like they hadn't already shown me what they were capable of. I sat on the couch with my phone face down on my knee, afraid of seeing myself in the black glass. Every few seconds, my eyes flicked up anyway, checking the mirror above the fireplace. Still synchronized, still behaving. That was the problem. At 10:37 p.m., I heard the sound of footsteps upstairs. Slow, barefoot. I froze. "Emma?" I called. No answer. I stood, moving carefully, keeping my gaze fixed forward as I crossed the living room. At the base of the stairs, I hesitated. The mirror at the top waited for me, catching the glow from the hallway light like an open eye. I took one step up. The mirror showed me taking two. My stomach dropped. I took another step. The reflection followed, but wrong. Not delayed this time. Anticipating, like it already knew what I was about to do. I shut my eyes hard, heart racing, and whispered, "Stop." Footsteps continued, not above me, behind me. I spun around, eyes still closed, hands out in front of me. I bumped into the wall, breath coming too fast, ears straining for any sound that would tell me where it was. The house was silent, too silent. Then I heard Emma's voice, not from upstairs, but from somewhere closer, from the hallway mirror. "You're standing in its place," she said softly. I opened my eyes. The living room was empty, but the mirror above the fireplace wasn't reflecting it correctly. The room in the glass looked later. The couch cushions were disturbed. The lamp was tipped over. A chair lay on its side near the stairs, a version of the room that hadn't happened yet. And in the center of that reflection stood me, my back to the mirror, head tilted slightly, like I was listening to something just out of frame. Behind that version of me, something stepped closer. Tall, thin, almost human, but bent at the wrong angles, like it had learned posture by imitation, not experience. I staggered back, gasping. The reflection of me didn't. It stayed, and slowly, very slowly, it began to turn around, not copying me, choosing to. From upstairs, Emma screamed. The mirror's surface rippled just once, and I understood then, with awful clarity, it didn't want to come out. It wanted me to go in. Part 5. What stayed behind. Emma's scream broke whatever spell had locked my body in place. I turned away from the mirror and ran. Up the stairs, past the landing mirror without looking, straight into Emma's room. She was sitting upright in bed, eyes squeezed shut, hands pressed over her face exactly the way she must have been taught. "It's not supposed to know your back," she cried. "It's only supposed to know your face." I grabbed her and pulled her against my chest, my own eyes burning as I forced them shut too. We stayed like that, breathing together, counting breaths the way you count seconds during a power outage. Nothing touched us. Nothing spoke. The house didn't move. When the silence finally felt empty again, I opened my eyes. The room was normal. No distortions, no shadows bending the wrong way. The mirror on Emma's dresser reflected us exactly as we were, me holding her, both of us shaking. I didn't wait for her mother to come home. I called Claire and told her I was leaving. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. She just said she understood and asked one question before hanging up. "Did you look too long?" I didn't answer. I never went back to that house. Months passed, then years. Life moved on in the way it always does, when something terrible doesn't follow you outright, just close enough that you can feel it when you stop paying attention. But something never went back to normal. Mirrors stopped behaving. Not obviously. Not enough that anyone else noticed. Just wrong in ways too small to argue about. Security cameras sometimes didn't show my reflection at all. Store mirrors would blur my face for half a second before sharpening. Video calls froze on frames where my expression didn't feel like mine. Once, late at night, I caught my reflection standing still while I leaned forward to wash my hands, just for a breath. Then it caught up. I stopped looking after that. I moved apartments, changed routines, covered mirrors when I could. Emma wrote me a letter a year later. Just one sentence, written carefully in a child's handwriting. "It knows where you end now." I burned the letter. But sometimes, usually when I'm tired or distracted or standing too close to the glass, I feel it. That faint hesitation, that space between when I move and when the reflection agrees. And I know something stayed behind that night. Not in the house, in the mirror, learning.